Not as refreshing, though, as seeing 44-year-old Tom Brady have to squirm a little bit, just a little bit, as he was asked some questions about some of the things that have happened in his fairly eventful 2022 offseason. Let's start with a little back and forth. I believe Ira Kaufman of JoeBucksFan.com was the one who asked the questions about Tom Brady's relationship with now former head coach Bruce Arians. Have a listen.
Can you clear the air maybe on your relationship with Coach Arians? Was there any substantive issues between you two at the end of the season?
Zero whatsoever, yeah. He and I have a great relationship, and I think that's, part of why I chose here was because of Bruce. I mean, he and I have been as incredible communication, and, I have great respect for him, and he knows how I feel about him. That's the most important thing. And I know how he feels about me, so.
Did those reports bother you, Tom? Because they didn't portray you in a flattering light, some of those reports.
See, I don't read a lot of them, so I think part of just, there's a lot of things that aren't right that are said, and I think the thing is you come out and try to respond to everything that's not right, We don't have to be right very often. You just have to be right every so often these days, and I think if people click on it, then, you read more of it, and obviously they're clicking on it, so it's what people want and what's talked about, and it may not be accurate, but that's okay. I mean, I don't make every pass either, so I don't complete every pass, so I understand not everyone can get it right all the time.
Tom Brady trying to shrug off his concerns or lack thereof regarding what was said about his role in specifically engineering, some believe, the ouster of Bruce Arians. And I'll go back to the night that Tom Brady unretired after a 40-day break from football. I was told the next shoe to fall is Arians will be out as the head coach. I was never able to nail that down, but 17 days later, it nailed itself down. Arians was out as the head coach. And Shireen, before we go any farther with what Brady said yesterday, we have to keep in mind the statement that he uttered last year while appearing on LeBron James' show, The Shop. What I say versus what I think are two totally different things. I would say 90% of what I say is probably not what I'm thinking, which is challenging, And I really admire people that actually can do that and say what they think because they invite a lot of things into their life. And I think part of me that doesn't like conflict, so in the end, I always try to play it super flat. So, with that context that he gave us last year, what'd you make of what he had to say yesterday?
Oh, Mike, and I would say that's probably true with more than half. I was trying to think of the percentage, but I will leave it at more than half of the NFL players and coaches in this league. I would say that most times when they talk, they don't tell the truth. And on the other hand, I think when you look at Bruce Arians, I would say he speaks his mind. He is one of those who's going to be 90% of the time, he probably tells you the truth, and 10% he doesn't. So I'm very conflicted by this whole thing about, I have so many questions about how this played out because Arians is never afraid to speak his mind. If truly there was a rift, why did Arians leave and not say anything? Why wouldn't he be mad at this point and speak out? Is it money that's keeping him from being forced out and keeping out? How did that play out? And when was it decided? When was Brady told that when he was coming back that Arians was leaving? That's another question I have. And I would like to ask, I don't think that question's been asked to Tom Brady. When were you told that Bruce Arians was not coming back as your head coach? Because as you've written several times, there was no real response from Brady after he was told that, after Bruce Arians announced that he wasn't coming back. So how long did Tom Brady know? So I think both of these things could be true, that maybe Brady wanted Bruce Arians out, but maybe Bruce Arians wanted to leave too. I think both of those things could be true.
Well, first on Arians, I think he has signed on to the narrative that was crafted for him so that he could walk away on his own terms as the champion, as the hero. It just doesn't make any sense that he dog-paddled his way through the bulk of the offseason, free agency, scouting combine, and then all of a sudden he's out. He would have stayed if Blaine Gabbert was his guy, but he's leaving when Tom Brady is there to maybe give him a shot at the Hall of Fame, and he claims he wasn't interested in the Hall of Fame. Sure, Jan. Sure, he wasn't interested in the Hall. Sure. He's not interested in winning a second Super Bowl and possibly setting himself up for a bust with a Kangol hat in Canton, Ohio. Sure, he's not interested in that. I think that he knew what was happening, and he had two choices. He could stomp his feet and scream and yell and make it an ugly departure, or he could accept the narrative that someone crafted that made him look like a hero, like a champion, doing the right thing, doing the noble thing, handing the baton to Todd Bowles at a time when Tom Brady would be his quarterback and not Blaine Gabbert or whoever else they would have gotten. The other thing, too, as it relates to Brady. When Brady says of Arians, I think that's a part of why I chose here was because of Bruce. Okay, fine. Then why weren't you even the slightest bit upset? The example I used back at the time was, what if Drew Brees had unretired from the Saints and then 17 days later Sean Payton says, I'm out? I'd like to think Drew Brees would have been like, what the hell? I'm back. You're leaving? At least some display of consternation instead of, no big deal. Okay, fine, okay. Come on. So I nothing that was said yesterday makes me feel any differently about Brady's role in nudging the piece of ice out into the water with Arians on it. Again, informed by his own admission that in order to avoid conflict, 90% of the time he lies about what he's really thinking, Shireen.
Well, Mike, and I do wonder why it took 17 days. And you go back to Bruce Arians, you talk about scouting combine, all that. He showed up at the owners' meetings and then left and then announced that he was departing the team. So that whole thing, the way it played out, is just so weird to me. And again, I would like to know when Brady was told that Arians wasn't coming back. And I think that's a legitimate question to ask Tom Brady. Again, probably won't get the truth since 90% of the time he says he doesn't give the truth. But I would at least like to pose that question to him and pose that question to Bruce Arians and pose that question to Jason Light. Did Brady find out that Bruce Arians was not going to be his head coach if and when he came back to the team? This whole thing is just weird, and you've seen his presence at OTAs and everything else that's gone on. It's just a weird thing, the way this has played out and what happened. And we may never know the truth. Again, it might be the book that comes out, your book that comes out in 10 years from now, that we do find out the truth, but I don't think we're going to find out the truth this season.
The standard approach I take when it comes to a mystery like this that could either spring from conspiracy or incompetence. I love a good conspiracy, but usually the best explanation is incompetence. I'll say this, though. It was genius if it was planned that Bruce Arians would keep his intentions pressed close to the vest until after the league meetings, because if he had left before everyone in the league gathers in Florida for those annual meetings, maybe some of those answers would have been obtained. Maybe there would have been an aggressive effort, chatter, rumor, scuttlebutt. Ownership is there. Have a few drinks. Loosen the lips a little bit. Sink some ships. Maybe some truth bubbles up if people know to go looking for it. Nobody knew to go looking for it. It was timed perfectly. He was there and left during the meetings themselves, and it was later that same week that the announcement was made. Very calculated, very deliberate, handed to Sam Farmer and Peter King simultaneously. The release comes 15 minutes later. The press conference is the next day. It's all very orchestrated in the delivery. So why wouldn't it have been orchestrated? In the planning, in the timing, and avoiding creating this vacuum of information and having everyone go to Florida and try to fill it with facts during those 3 days that everyone's gathered for the league meetings. I think it was genius that they did the way they did. It's confounding because maybe we could have gotten to some real truth, but they did it in a way that made everyone completely unaware that there was any truth to go find, Shireen.
Yeah, it's exactly right, Mike, because Arians there, and then the media availability comes, and all of a sudden he's not there. He's gone. And so there wasn't that opportunity to ask him those questions. And if you had gotten that opportunity, maybe some of the truth would have come out. Again, Bruce Arians is never afraid of speaking his mind. And I think, you know, at some point, maybe he reveals exactly what went on, and maybe he doesn't. Maybe he wants that to seem like that's a great relationship, and maybe it'll become a better relationship. Maybe they'll go play some golf and bet on some golf, and things will be peachy. But I do think there was some conflict there. Whether that led Bruce Arians to leave and that was the reason that he left, I would like to think and hope that the real reason he left is, as he said, was to give Todd Bowles a chance to win a championship. He's been very good to minority coaches. He's been very good to female coaches. I'm going to miss that about Bruce Arians. That's the biggest thing I'm going to miss about him, because he has taken on that role of leadership to help those guys, help minority coaches get to where Todd Bowles now is as a second chance as a head coach, which a lot of minority coaches never get that opportunity. So regardless of how it played out, Mike, that's the good news. Todd Bowles gets his second chance as a head coach, and I think with this team, he's going to do a very good job, has a chance to win a Super Bowl, and show that he is a really good coach, and I do think he's a really good coach.
One last point very quickly before we move on to one of the other off-season controversies involving Tom Brady. Something you said just made the light bulb flash in my brain. Bruce Arians left the league meetings before the NFC coaches breakfast, which has become less breakfast and more press conference.
Yeah.
Think of how awkward it would have been and how weird it would have been if he goes to that thing and they ask him a bunch of questions and he answers them as if he's going to be the coach, when he knows damn well he's not going to be the coach. It was weird that he was at the scouting combine answering all those questions as if he's going to be the coach, and supposedly knew he wasn't going to be the coach. I still think at the time he thought he was going to be the coach. What's he going to say at the coach's breakfast? They ask him some question about the draft. I ain't going to be the coach, so it doesn't matter. I mean, what's he going to say? So you say nothing. You ghost the thing. You leave. So I think it was crafted. I think it was deliberate, and they pulled it off. They pulled it off because the story never got the traction that maybe it should have.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.